This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Real Talkers, and obviously a ton to get to. You don't even have to have been paying attention to the news. You don't even have to have been watching the headlines over the past few days to know the debacle that unfolded in the Oval Office. Has the entire world talking, with the stakes never higher, as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky sits down with the American president, the American vice president, the Secretary of State, and it obviously goes completely sideways. Over the past few days, the fallout has been significant following that clash between Zelensky and President Donald Trump, J.D. Vance there as well, of course, other nations, and of course, NATO, the EU, stepping up in response to that, and it's been stark. It's been startling to see how this is all unfolding. In this episode of the show, we're going to talk to political scientist Dr. Duane Bratt about this. We'll get into our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power to see what you have to say about this, but that's not all we're talking about. The Alberta budget dropped just a couple of days ago. Boom, bust, Alberta. That's my interpretation of it, but I want to know the business angle on it. We'll talk to Edmonton Chamber CEO Doug Griffiths about 20 minutes into this episode. A big win, by the way, as well, from Ontario Premier Doug Ford and his PC party, a third majority government. He's the first to do that in about 70 years. Pretty remarkable stuff. Was it worth the $130 million? We'll talk about that and other federal political storylines with poll analyst from 338 Canada, Philippe Fournier, who joins us on the back half of this episode.
What a
technical
week to
producer
take off,
of this
eh?
show, John Hicks, behind the controls. It's nice to see you again. It's
Welcome
been
back.
absolutely bonkers, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Dr. Bratt has to say about this, but everybody as well. I've been most interested to hear if I was watching an interview with Chris Christie, obviously a prominent Republican in the United States, and his interpretation of what happened in the White House. Obviously, we're hearing from world leaders. We'll reference the Slovenian president. Obviously, the Danes have had something to say about this. Denmark with a strong statement on this. And of course, everybody's wondering, what does this mean for Canada? We're one day away from the threatened implementation of tariffs. We'll get into that with Doug Griffiths as well. So always a ton to catch up on, but it's nice to see your face, buddy.
Hey, welcome back. You look a little tan.
Hey, well, I got a little jump in my step now, ready to go. I was chomping at the bit when this all went down, and I don't want to get into too much personal story time, but we took a few days away last week and trying to get away from the news cycle, and when all hell broke loose in the Oval Office, the news was making its way around. It didn't matter where you were. It didn't matter who you were with. Everybody was wondering, have you seen what went down in the Oval Office?
I went online. I was like, is this AI? Is this real life? Is this a soap opera? But hey, I'm telling you, we should take a week off more often because it paid off.
Yeah, I think it did pay off for sure. Well said. We're going to hit the ground running here because we got a lot to cover. There's stuff I haven't even talked about. I haven't even talked about the video that Trump posted about Trump Gaza, the new real estate development. I mean, it's almost like I don't even know what to say about that. But this episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. You know where you can find them. That's relo.ca. It's Relo, where better real estate training starts. Real estate learning online for the bold and ambitious, and no matter where you are in your real estate career, they can help you find the next level. You might just be flirting with the idea. Maybe you've been in real estate for a while, but looking to maybe hang your own shingle. Start off on your own, commercial, residential real estate, whatever it is, they've got you covered. The best of both worlds. Check out their website again. That's relo.ca to learn more about what you can expect. They'll get you set to write your exam. They'll get you licensed, and then, of course, they'll help you hit the ground running when it comes to your actual career application. Start it off on the right foot. This is the only way to start at relo.ca. Don't forget the promo code Ryan100 knocks $100 off the Alberta commercial and residential real estate bundles. That's all one word, Ryan100, when you get started today at relo.ca. I acknowledge everybody has seen this video already, the actual meeting, about 40 minutes long, but I wanted to pick it up before we get to Dr. Bratt, just a couple of minutes just to set the tone. And I think it's always interesting where you launch into this conversation. There's a lot of theories about how this went down, why this went down in the Oval Office, in particular between the Vice President, the President of the United States, and Ukraine's leader, obviously wearing what he has worn in solidarity, by the way, with Ukrainian soldiers. I'm sure that we'll get into that and talk about that this episode as well, the chirps at what Zelensky was wearing. But there was a moment where the tide turned. There was a moment where somebody threw gas on the fire, and it was the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. Things had been kind of at a slow simmer. The Americans, Donald Trump, trying to convince Zelensky to sign on to a ceasefire. But it's a ceasefire that pretty much everybody acknowledges would look at Ukraine ceding territory. It's not a great deal for Ukraine, which is why Zelensky says his people don't want it. And that's when Vice President Vance pretty much snaps.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful
to
come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
what
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very
you will
good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From
yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens
war.
to be right about
From
it.
the very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a
Bratt,
good position.
I
You don't
was
have
in
the cards right now. With us, you start
I'm
having
not playing
cards. But
cards.
right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're gambling
I'm the
with the
president
lives of
anymore.
millions of people.
You
You're gambling with World War III.
What do you think
You're
about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's
with
back
all
to
respect
you.
to your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
wearing
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America.
He wanted him to kiss the ring. He didn't kiss the ring. He wanted him to say thank you. He didn't say thank you. And so we see an unprecedented exchange in a chamber, this Oval Office that is typically the home of hushed tones and diplomacy on display. Dr. Duane Bratt, a political scientist out of Mount Royal University, has seen many presidents, many delegates, many international leaders visit the Oval Office. I'm not sure, Doc, that you've ever seen anything like this. Well, where were you? Everybody's talking about where they were when they first saw the Oval Office debacle.
I was in my office at Mount Royal watching it on CNN. I've got this set up in my office where on news days I've got a thing set up there and I'm trying to work, and I did not get much work done. It was, you often have these sorts of discussions behind the scenes, but this was deliberate. I actually think behind the scenes things were quite cordial. Trump and especially Vance wanted this in front of the cameras. This was, as Tom Nichols of The Atlantic called it, an ambush. And it didn't come out of nowhere. You have to recall J.D. Vance's trip to Munich and the Munich Security Summit when he talked down to the Europeans about how they were doing nothing about Ukraine. You have to talk about during the election campaign, Trump had two messages about the war in Ukraine. One is he could end it in one day. And the second, the war would never have happened if he had been president. Nothing bad ever happened when he was president, by the way. And then he speaks to Putin after becoming inaugurated and lays out his peace plan, which is essentially Vladimir's peace plan. Have a ceasefire, give Russia everything that they want. And we'll move on. That is not peace. That's subjugate. And that's what Zelensky is fighting against. And I thought Zelensky held himself up pretty well. He is a steely leader. He could have left early in the war. He did not. He chose to stay and fight. And that is what is going on here. It is remarkable, and it's interesting to watch the reaction, not just in words, but in action that occurred in the days after.
Yeah, let's get into that. You and I can jump back and forth over, the 72 hours or whatever that followed, because, I mean, there's a ton to follow, but essentially NATO and the EU leaders all meeting over the weekend and agreeing to provide a security guarantee for this Ukraine peace deal. Does that solidarity say something? What should it say to American citizens?
And Canada.
Yeah, of
Canada
course.
was there. It wasn't all the EU. It wasn't all the NATO. They deliberately called it the coalition of the willing. So Viktor Orban of Hungary, who's a Putin ally and a Trump ally, he didn't seem to be able to show up to London. But it is a clear illustration. You're hearing countries talking about putting European and Canadian troops on the ground, that we haven't heard anything like that before. Trump is unifying the Europeans. Putin did a pretty good job of unifying the Europeans. After all, Sweden and Finland stayed out of NATO throughout the Cold War. But right after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, they went and petitioned and have subsequently joined NATO. So just as Trump is doing a good job of unifying Canadians, he's also unifying Europeans against him. And you also there's something there between Trump and Putin. There's all sorts of conspiracy theories about what that is. I don't know what it is, but there is something there where he seems to look up and admire Vladimir Putin, and Putin plays him like a fiddle. And with Zelensky, you have to put this into context as well. The first impeachment was involving a phone call with Vladimir Zelensky. So Trump, for him, everything is personal. I don't know what the personal issue is with Putin, but it's easy to figure out what the personal issue is with Ukraine, and that's Zelensky in the first impeachment.
There's a lot of people in our live chat right now that are talking about the self-control that Zelensky was showing. I want people to remember, I think most people do, that just days prior to him walking into this Oval Office, walking up to the meeting with Trump, I should note there's a million details here, but even Zelensky stepping out of his transport to greet the president as the president meets him at the White House, Trump says, all dressed up, like a little shot at what he's wearing right out of the gates. But keep in mind, Trump had been referring to him as a dictator. Trump had been saying that Ukraine had started the war. Zelensky was going into hostile territory no matter what.
Oh, and he knew that, and you could see the body language in Zelensky when he's already got his arms crossed up, and he's already sort of in fighting mode before the tough questions really begin. And there's just so much information that Trump is spreading. Ukraine did not start the war unless you say that, well, Russia just wanted to take over Ukraine and Ukraine fought back, therefore Ukraine started the war. That's about the only way that you could frame that. Yes, Zelensky postponed elections, but so did Churchill. It's tough to go door knocking when the doors are being blown up. And so it's talking points, this idea. He overinflates how much American aid has gone in. It is substantial, but it's nowhere near the $300 billion he talks about. It's probably closer to 60 or 70 billion. This idea that without U.S. aid, Ukraine would fall within days. Well, it took a while for U.S. aid to get to Ukraine in the first place, and yet the Ukrainians were able to fight. Even the U.S. State Department believed that Ukraine would fall within a week in 2022. And here we are going into year 4 of the war, and the Ukrainians are fighting back. And yes, Vance can talk about the use of conscripts, which happens in a war, but Putin is emptying his prisons to send to the battlefield as well. Ukraine is doing pretty good given all of the disadvantages that they're facing. And my fear is not just that they're going to blow U.S. aid from Ukraine. I think that's inevitable. But you could see a situation where Trump actually starts providing support to the Russians. As ridiculous as that sounds, it's quite plausible that would happen.
I appreciate that you're bringing logic to this and you're touching on important points and developing your arguments, but let's also acknowledge that whether or not we're talking about elections being held or conscripts or whatever the case may be, when's the last time that a wartime leader was lectured, was lambasted by the vice president and the president, sort of a two-headed monster in front of the world with a very American...
this is I've never seen anything like this. and some of the writers are talking about it would be if, during Churchill's trip to Washington, that, FDR brought in the radio folks and the other journalists and lambasted Churchill and says, well, just give Hitler what he wants. And you kind of started this already. And, that sort of attitude. That's probably the equivalent of what we're seeing here. And lives are at stake. Significant lives are at stake that have already lost. And again, everything is personal with Trump. And Vance will do whatever Trump wants him to do. He went to Munich on a mission. He clearly played a role in this exchange. I understand the relationship between Zelensky and Trump. But it's that relationship with Trump and Putin. If he is not a puppet of Vladimir Putin, I'd like to know what a puppet looks like.
I want to read a couple of statements from international leaders. Slovenian's President Nataša Muzar says Slovenia upholds principles, respect of international law, international relations. What we witnessed in the Oval Office undermines these values and the foundations of diplomacy. This is pretty remarkable for world leaders to be speaking about the American president like this. She says we stand firmly in support of Ukraine's sovereignty. We repeat, Russia is the aggressor. I think that's key. She says it's imperative that we nurture and protect democratic ideals, ensuring they're reflected in our actions and interactions on the global stage. It's time for Europe to take the lead on the path to peace in Ukraine with respect to international law, UN Charter, fairness, and above all, decency. Obviously, for Europe, this is about more than just
Europe
Ukraine,
has already taken the lead.
Right? And this is
take an even bigger lead.
But this is a threat to Europe. Like, right?
Oh, yeah. Would you want to be in Poland right now or Moldova right now or the Baltic states right now? No, this is a threat. Putin has made no bones about it that he believes that the disappearance of the Soviet Empire was the great tragedy of the 20th century. He's intervened into Georgia. He invaded Crimea in 2014. He makes sure he's got a puppet state in Belarus, right? This is who Vladimir Putin is. And then the question then becomes, why is the United States allied with Putin? That never used to happen before. They used to side with democracies and against dictatorships. And it really is about Donald Trump. Donald Trump has shaped the Republican Party. There are still some Republicans who came out and criticized him, but others who said, what a horrible person Zelensky is. And Zelensky started all of this, and the disrespect of wearing army fatigues in the Oval Office. And meanwhile, as Zelensky is entering the White House, there are smiling photos with those same Republican senators. And all of a sudden, they're just distanced themselves because Trump did. If Trump woke up this morning and says, so today is not Monday morning, it's Wednesday morning, there would be Republicans who would echo that and make private members' bills to change Mondays to Wednesdays.
Hey, Duane, I think there's something else, and I know people are talking about it, maybe not enough. There was this moment where Trump goes to bat for Putin. Basically alluding a witch hunt. And I thought it was significant. I want to get it on the record on this episode. Check this out. This is Donald Trump as part of that. No worries, folks, if you missed it. There's a lot to focus on. But check this out.
If you want to position yourself in the middle between Russia and Ukraine, or on the Ukraine
No, I'm in the middle. I want to solve this thing. I'm for both. I want to get it solved. And I've known him for a long time. I've dealt with him for a long time. He had to suffer through the Russia hoax. Russia was a hoax. It was all Biden. It was nothing to do with him. So he had to suffer through that, and he was able to do that. I think that he wants to make a deal, and he'd like to see it end. That's all I do. That's what I do. My whole life, that's what I do, is make deals. If I didn't align myself with both of them, you'd never have a deal. You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal? It doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred, and I understand that, but I can tell you the other side isn't exactly in love with, him either.
Just absolutely bizarre, Duane.
No, and the Russia hoax he's referring to is the Mueller report. And if you read volume 1 of the Mueller report, there was clear Russian interference in the 2016 election on behalf of Donald Trump, whether that was Russian bots, whether that was WikiLeaks, whether that was the meeting that Don Jr. and Manafort had with Russian officials. That was all clearly laid out. Mueller, though, in the second volume said he simply couldn't lay charges because of issues around the Department of Justice and et cetera. So even though Trump calls it the Russia hoax, it was not a hoax. There was an awful lot of fire there. And everything we have seen since shows that. The infamous Helsinki meeting where he talked about believing Putin over his intelligence agents. That is all true. And to say he has to be neutral, but there's no way that they can make a deal because Zelensky doesn't like Putin and hates Putin. Well, Putin sure hates Zelensky as well, right? So he is not neutral. How do you be neutral between an aggressor and a defender?
Yeah.
That's not neutrality. That's shamefulness.
Unbelievable. Canada's current Prime Minister for now, Justin Trudeau, says Russia illegally and unjustifiably invaded Ukraine. That's what he leads with. He says for 3 years now, Ukrainians have fought with courage and resilience. Their fight for democracy, freedom, and sovereignty is a fight that matters to us all. Canada will continue to stand with Ukraine and Ukrainians in achieving a just and lasting peace. He goes on to talk about in London, he says, I announced new sanctions against key Kremlin allies, paramilitary organizations, leaders, and others who are complicit in helping Russia wage war in Ukraine. We won't allow Russia's enablers to prolong this illegal invasion. Whether it's under Trudeau, Carney, Freeland, Poilievre, or otherwise, what does Canada's response need to look like, and how would you evaluate it a few days in?
Canada has always been a very strong supporter of Ukraine and has put billions of dollars on the table. We have accepted refugees, including in Alberta. We've provided, we do not have a strong military, and that's a whole other story, but we have provided military aid for what we have. I think all of that is going to continue, regardless who is there. This is a unified Canadian issue, and I think we'll continue to do so. And the bigger issue is the Europeans. Can they cover the gap that the Americans have to allow the Ukrainians to keep fighting? I think we have to start considering a NATO without the U.S., a G7 without the U.S. I don't know about what's going to happen to NORAD, but they're not a trustworthy partner. They are choosing dictators over democracy. They are willing to attack their friends and defend their enemies. This is not the U.S. that we have known. Even during the first Trump administration, you've got to go back to the 19th century.
Just think about what you're saying. Like, I want this audience to think about what you're saying. A G7 without the U.S., a NATO without the U.S. Like,
and they created those organizations. But, I don't know how you stay in there. There were challenges within the G7 during the first Trump administration. But now if he says, well, we have to bring the Russians back or I'm not coming in, he is fighting with every G6 country. He has attacked NATO countries, whether that is Canada, whether that is Denmark, whether that is Norway. So it is tough to say, and it's not hyperbolic. Just look at what we have seen over the last 2 months.
Check out my screen for the podcast listeners. This is Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, on the couch beside Vice President Vance.
Wondering about his life choices.
Jeremy Farkas, the newest candidate for mayor in Calgary. Catch him on Real Talk tomorrow, by the way. He says, run the tape and look at Rubio. Says that guy couldn't get any deeper into the couch, short of becoming a quarter. Unbelievable body language and indicative there. He knows something stinks. Most common sense Republicans know something really stinks right now.
Yeah, and where are they? They have drank the Trump Kool-Aid and they do whatever he says. And instead of questioning and Trump is more control now than he was in the first administration. He has grabbed control of the military. He has grabbed control of the Justice Department. He has grabbed control of the Intelligence Department. He knows who blocked him from supporting Putin even more the first time.
Hey, listen, I want to talk to you about a story closer to home as well. The Alberta budget drops late last week. There's a lot of storylines. Revenues down a little bit. Expenditures are up a little bit. There's a lot of groups that are pissed off about where the money's going. Others are saying it's a move in the right direction. Priorities are straight. What are the high-level bullet points that you take away? How do you assess this budget from the UCP?
Well, overall, I thought it was a cautious budget in the face of the threats of Trump tariffs. I think their assumptions around where the price of oil is and the impact of tariffs and developing a contingency fund and willing to run a deficit without cutting spending, I thought that was all prudent and proper. The one thing I have a problem with is the tax cut. To borrow money for a tax cut just doesn't make any sense. If Danielle Smith said a year ago that there was too much economic uncertainty and we're going to have to delay the tax cut, there's a hell of a lot more economic uncertainty going on right now, and that's what she introduced it. So if it hadn't been for that, I'd have been very satisfied with a very tough budget given the circumstances the government was facing. But I just can't get over the idea of we're going to borrow money with our right hand to hand it back with our left hand.
Does she get credit for keeping the promise? She said she'd do it. I mean, we grinded her gears last time she was on this show.
No, you don't.
I don't.
He is taking the victory lap on that. Had that tax cut come into place immediately, because it was her number one priority, and she kept it in place and didn't change it as a result of this significant economic threat, sure, fine, great. But when you've already delayed it, and now this is the time and place that you feel you should do it, no, I can't give her a lot of credit for that. It just doesn't make any fiscal sense.
All right, Danielle Smith in front of reporters just a short time ago talking about the budget and other matters, including this alleged AHS scandal. And I want to get to the question and the answer. Our audience is going to hear from longtime Alberta political correspondent Jason Markusoff, who puts a question in front of the Premier on the firing of the former AHS CEO, Menzalopoulos, who's now, of course, suing the government for $1.7 million. Smith is promising a robust statement of defense, but context is important. Here's how that exchange went down.
Your government hired Athana Menzalopoulos, and she was executing a lot of the restructuring. You brought her in at that time. Are you telling the public, are you telling people here, are you telling us that you believe that she was just this AHS, longtime crony, standing in the way of what the government wanted?
And Jason, again, we're going with one question, one follow-up.
That's fine. I'll answer that.
I'm not as good a counter as
that's
some
fine.
people are.
I'll answer that. I think you're friends with her, so maybe you can ask her yourself. I won't presume to speak for the former CEO, but what I will say is that there will be a very robust statement of defense that the minister will be filing on our behalf. And we ended that contract because we needed some new leadership going in the new direction. The new leadership going in the new direction has to be satisfied that the job, waking up every single day, is figuring out how to improve performance at the 100+ facilities run by Alberta Health Services, not figuring out how to shut down everybody else.
She's sticking to her guns on this one. Duane, what's your read
and
on this?
refusing to acknowledge the fact that she hired her, recruited her heavily, and did not hire her right at the beginning, but hired her after she'd already fired some other people into that position in December of 2023. And the question should be, why did you hire her and why did you fire her?
What do you make of calls from, actually, why don't we load up Naheed Nenshi here? I'll play a brief video. This is the leader of the Alberta NDP, not yet the leader of the official opposition. He's waiting for a seat. He needs that seat in Edmonton, Strathcona to officially become that. But Naheed Nenshi, pretty strong words for the incumbent, for the health minister, Adriana LaGrange.
Adriana LaGrange is the worst health minister in Alberta's history. She's presided over a crumbling system with wait times going up and money being wasted. A million Albertans don't have a family doctor. ER wait times in Edmonton yesterday were over 12 hours. Why is the Premier defending this completely incompetent minister? She was incompetent in education. She's incompetent in health. But the Premier, for some reason, would rather let someone who's trying to blow the whistle go than actually firing this minister.
So he's, of course, referencing Peter Guthrie, who resigned from cabinet, alleging dishonesty. I mean, he talks about essentially a toxic culture around the table. You think even politically, strategy-wise, it'd be easier for the Premier to create a little distance from herself and the problem by throwing LaGrange under the bus. How do you see this unfolding?
I think Smith is showing loyalty to LaGrange. Health is a tough position. I agree with some of what Nenshi was saying there, but name me a good health minister, right? It is the toughest portfolio because there's always going to be waiting lists and people are going to die, and it's the biggest spending envelope. Nobody wants to become health minister, and LaGrange is doing the bidding of Smith. Do you think that Adrienne LaGrange fired the CEO of Alberta Health Services and then fired the board solely on her idea, and she never told the premier, or never asked the premier? No. So if you're Smith, how do you move LaGrange when LaGrange is doing exactly what you asked her to do?
What do you make of Peter Guthrie's resignation? It's pretty. People have been talking about. He's been emotional about it. He returns essentially to a private member. He can now speak freely. But
there's a lot in that letter and a lot of what he said subsequent to that letter. But some of the key takeaways from the letter is he uses the phrase, "I've been talking about this for months." Well, this AHL scandal, the current one, only broke out a couple weeks ago. Then he discovered that there was a contract within his own department involving a real estate deal with this Sam Marish, and he wanted to investigate all contracts that Sam Marish had with infrastructure. He felt he was ignored. His memo, which he never should have put in writing, recommending LaGrange be shuffled out, got leaked, not by Guthrie. I wonder who did that within cabinet, or perhaps the premier's office. But Guthrie isn't going to shut up. Guthrie was a pain in the ass to Jason Kenney throughout COVID from the back benches, and I think he's going to continue to do that. And it just shows every day there's a new development on this story. We're going to end up in a public inquiry. Smith is trying to avoid that, but I don't know how she can keep avoiding that. We're going to end up in that position.
Yeah, that Sam Marish real estate deal profiting $300,000. I'll acknowledge that real estate values can change in short periods of time and things can happen, but like it just when you
there seems to be a lot of good business deals that Marish seems to have with the government over and over and over and over.
A very prosperous relationship.
Businessmen in Edmonton, Ryan, that you can point the government to?
Yeah, I don't know. It just adds another layer to the story. It's a story with a ton of layers. I'm grateful that you've dug through them with us, Duane, and it feels like we're just getting started. Thanks for your time here, Dr. Duane Bratt, of course, the political scientist, the straw that stirs the drink in that department at Mount Royal University. Thanks, Duane.
Okay, see you, Ron.
Yeah, you bet, buddy. He's already on to the next thing. I love that. Fast moving. I want to get through our live.
He's a busy guy.
He's a busy guy. This is like in our live chat powered by Park Power. I'm not, Bunny Slipper says I'm not surprised by the resignation. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's remarkable what he says. Quote, as Minister of Infrastructure, I had line of sight into these processes. He says I had voiced concerns regarding the GOA's, the government's procurement practices across all departments. Says the former minister, says I had taken steps to address inconsistencies and recommend improvements as part of my fiduciary duty. He starts talking about financial oversight committees and advising on major government contracts. He says, he says, for this reason, I've decided to step down, return to caucus as a private member where I can continue to voice my concerns and hold cabinet accountable with honesty and integrity. This is a call coming from inside the House. It's all remarkable stuff. Listen. The goal of this episode today is to get you up to speed on everything you need to know about. And there's a million angles on all of it. And that includes the everyday, the real life implications of this budget for everybody living in Alberta. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to more on the live chat. I got to return to the Gaza video that Trump posted, the AI video with just with like bearded dancers and just absolute bizarre golden Donald Trump statues. It's one thing if it's funny generated by someone and Stephen Colbert tweets it. It's another if the unpredictable and eccentric Elon Musk posts it. But no,
of course, yeah.
The president of the United States posted it. So
but does this surprise you at all?
It doesn't.
We're way past that.
Nothing surprises me anymore. Listen, we're going to talk business in just a second. We've asked our good friends at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, led by the way, former cabinet minister Doug Griffiths. He's the CEO there now, to get into the business side of this. All this talk about Ukraine, all this talk about Canada, NATO, and the G7. Jagmeet Singh, by the way, says that Donald Trump should be barred from attending the G7 in Canada. By the way, it's not up to Canada. Certainly not up to Jagmeet Singh, but I'm curious for your take on that. But there's very real life stuff happening with the threat of tariffs looming. We need a business voice, and we need a strong perspective on this. Doug Griffiths will get us that in just a quick second. First, I want to ask you to visit supportthespark.ca. Why? Because when events beyond our borders, exactly like what we're talking about today, put Canada's economy in jeopardy, we've got to be making the right decisions, the right choices here at home. And that includes investing in world-class research and learning that fuels Alberta's prosperity. We can't afford to underfund academic staff at the University of Alberta because we can't afford to lose the teachers, the researchers, and the students that we need to power Alberta's future. Go to supportthespark.ca today. It takes just a couple of minutes. Help keep our future strong. Take action today. This is a message from the Association of Academic Staff of the University of Alberta. While we're talking money, while we're talking about investments, while we're talking about bottom lines and strategic advice, I want to refer you to northroadic.com. That's where you'll find our friends at North Road Investment Council. It's the time of year where people are talking about tax-free savings accounts. You know, you can add to your registered accounts this year an additional $7,000 to your TFSA. That's a combined total contribution room of over $100,000 for adults since 2009. But what type of investment should you be putting into your TFSA? If you're a taxable investor, that choice, it's a big one. It can have a dramatic effect on your after-tax portfolio success. And our friends at North Road Investment Council welcome the opportunity to speak to you about how you can reduce the taxes that you're paying on your investments. Investing isn't always simple. Don't go it alone. You can contact North Road through their website. That's northroadic.com. And I want to make sure that mid-March is on your radar now that we're into this beautiful month. Johnny, spring is upon us. This is super exciting. Yeah. If you go to ucan.ca, click on the Comedy Nights link. You know how proud we are to be supporting UCAN Youth Services. They're absolutely doing amazing work with the resources, educational and employment resources, transforming the futures, the present for that matter, of at-risk young people aged 18 to 25. They fund a big part of those programs through their comedy nights this year from the 10th to the 12th, the 17th to the 19th of March. You can find out more at ucancomedy.com. Real Talk is proud to be sponsoring a table at one of these nights. We got a live auction item that we're happy to contribute, all in support of a wonderful cause. You can learn more about what UCAN is doing, how they're transforming lives by visiting ucan.ca.
Beautiful drive to work today. I was just like, oh, man.
And it's almost sunroof open territory.
Construction boys and girls are out there. They're fixing those potholes.
Yeah, man. Before we know it.
I heard a crazy stat on potholes today on a morning show this morning. Do you know that last year we fixed over 500,000 potholes? I don't even know. I had to look it up. I was like, what? And the person said it's more than New York and London combined, Edmonton and surrounding
Nobody's got our radical climate. Nobody sees the 60-degree temperature swings. I got to figure out how to get the roads on my route fixed. These 500,000 potholes are nowhere I'm driving. Doug Griffiths is the president and CEO of Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. But before he was in that role, of course, he spent a considerable amount of time serving Albertans as an MLA, as a cabinet minister. It's wonderful to have you back on the show, my friend. Spring session at the Alberta Legislature. There's always a lot of new energy there. Everybody's looking forward to seeing what the government's priorities will be. What did this budget tell you about Danielle Smith's government's priorities?
Well, there was a deficit, and I know that some people are still talking about it, and that's got a couple of people riled up. But for the time that I spent in government, even Ralph Klein indicated there's good deficit and good debt, and there's bad debt. There's bad debt is when you've got to pay for day-to-day things like groceries on the credit card, and then there's good debt where you're investing in infrastructure and you're investing in the future. We all take on a mortgage when we buy a house. I don't know anybody that doesn't. My take after reading through the entire budget is that there is a deficit, but it is because of a strategic investment in helping to make sure that our communities are stronger. I think this is a longer term thinking. And then they're still putting money into the Heritage Trust Fund, which nobody likes a deficit, but I think this was a pretty good budget.
I don't know that there's any jurisdiction in Canada that pays closer attention to where oil prices are and where they're going to be. You've had insight into this kind of on both sides, analyzing it now and communicating to the business community what it means. How do you feel about where Minister Horner has the price pegged?
I think it's a reasonable price. You can't overanalyze, especially what's going to come with the tariff situation now. I still think that at any minute we could probably hear from the president that the tariffs are delayed for another 30 days.
Yeah,
it's more creating a sense of chaos and about the threat of tariffs and the impact those have than the actual tariffs themselves. Because I literally just got off the phone with a couple of chambers of commerce in the United States this morning, and they equally shook their head and said, "I don't know what the hell we're doing this for. This is going to impact our economy all across the United States negatively." So I don't know that even the president thinks it's a good idea. I think he's using it as a threat. This is just the way he negotiates and asserts powers. So I don't think Minister Horner could reasonably try and budget around a potential threat of tariffs over the long term. We need to deal with what we're dealing with today.
Yeah, but I mean, you and I both know, and your hundreds of members of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce know you can't sit there and let your common sense allow you to assume that these tariffs will not be imposed, because this is probably the most unpredictable world leader in the last 100 years, and I say that intentionally with purpose. So, I mean, on the one side, you've got governments like provincial governments here in Alberta that are having to respond to that and strategize around it, and then you've got individual businesses as well that are having to figure out what happens if this goes down, what does this mean if it doesn't, and what should our business plan look like moving forward, regardless look like.
Yeah, well, see, I think that last point that you made is the most critical one that we have to anticipate. I don't want us to waste a good crisis, and I've said it over and over again. These threats of the tariffs have woken us up to the fact that we don't have interprovincial free trade. We don't have the infrastructure in place to get all of our products, not just oil and gas, but all of our products to Tidewater from all across this country. We have been frankly, lazy and complacent in having the world's largest economy, easy and convenient to the south of us where we can trade. And so whatever we do, if the tariffs come into place to make our economy stronger and better, is exactly what we need to do if the tariffs don't come into place to make our economy stronger and better. And so I really hope that all of our governments and our businesses are anticipating what we can do to make ourselves more resilient, instead of hoping that the immediate crisis from a chaotic leader, the most unpredictable one, like you said, in the last 100 years, does something crazy. Because if the tariffs don't come in, or they do come in, we'll find something new and crazy that he's going to do to us next year or the year after. I mean, we've got 4 years of this. We need to make plans now on what we're going to do to make Canada's economy more resilient, which includes investing in infrastructure so we can all get to Tidewater with all of our products, to make sure that we reduce interprovincial trade barriers that can save us $200 billion nationally and increase our economy by as much as 4% in our GDP by 4%. Like, we need to do these things anyway.
Hey, I don't know if you saw this post. I feel like it's flying under the radar a little bit, from Scott Sinclair, who I think I would have described, might still describe him as a rising star in Alberta's United Conservative Party. He's the MLA, the Conservative MLA out of Lesser Slave Lake. But just after that budget dropped, I don't know if you saw his post on Facebook. This is actually kind of wild. Yeah. He describes it as, at best, disappointing, at worst, unacceptable for Albertans. This is remarkable for an MLA to be speaking like this, a government MLA. He says, I don't know who it's meant to serve, the budget he's talking about, but it certainly isn't for me, my family, my friends, or my constituents. And he goes on to just absolutely roast the government for investments, including in Edmonton's downtown, in particular the ICE district and the downtown arena district, but just goes on to talk about how he knows at the end of this, he says, this is going to be a tough week for me and my family, acknowledging that he gets what the implications are of putting his neck out like this. But he says this budget is indefensible. This is not an opposition MLA. This is a government MLA. He says it's indefensible for Lesser Slave Lake. I will not support it. I will not vote for it as is. I'll have more to say in the coming days. I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. Take me into your thoughts on that, the significance of it, and your thoughts. I mean, you've obviously been Minister of Municipal Affairs. You understand funding for different regions. This is very competitive. Calgary and Edmonton each want their share. So does Slave Lake. So does everybody else.
Yeah, well, you're talking to a guy who spent 13 years in politics, and I served under 5 premiers, and I managed to piss off every single one of them at some point or another, because I was pretty independent-minded. So I understand where he's coming from in that terms. I would also say that as much as I, as a rural MLA at the time, spent 13 years, spent 20 years advocating for rural communities, I never once said that, you know, the city shouldn't get what they need. Everyone is short on infrastructure investment, and this isn't an us versus them situation. We're all Albertans, and we want all of our communities to succeed, and you're not going to solve all of the problems in 1 year. So whatever the budget is this year, it's important to make sure that we have balanced investments across the province. Like I said, again, to focus on investing in that infrastructure so that we can, make sure all of our communities are strong next year and the year after and the year after. This is a long-term strategy. So I mean, if I had beer with him before, I would say, I understand your frustrations. I understand your need to speak out, but please also remember that this year is not the solution for everything. This is 1 year out of a decade of investment that needs to be made.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like, I guess what I'm asking you to do here is remove your Edmonton Chamber hat for just a quick second, and then just will remind people of your 13 years in politics. It's just a strategy question. I can't ignore this theme of, like, Peter Guthrie resigns and kind of throws a hand grenade on his way out, and then Scott Sinclair chooses to. I mean, you got to pick your spots, and this is a pretty big spot. Like, you got to advocate for your region. You got to convince the people that put you there, in other words, your constituents, you got to convince them that you're fighting for them, that you'll do whatever to get them the highway they need, or to get them the community center or the school or the hospital that they need. But you've also got to protect your own political career. You got to support your own government. How do you find the line?
Well, I reminded my constituents all the time that I was fighting for them. But I also reminded them that our constituency was not an island, and our communities would not be prosperous while the rest of Alberta suffered. It's like a family, and you have to give people what they need at the time, and you don't have enough resources to give everybody everything they need, but you do your best. And as far as the rest goes, I mean, I just got to say, Ryan, I've been out of politics for 10 years, and I even went through rehab. I'm fully recovered, so I can say objectively, every party, the government itself, needs to continually realize it's a family, and that we all have the same objectives. We're not trying to help one community or one part of the province or one type of people survive or succeed over the rest. That's not a good long-term strategy for success.
We're talking to Doug Griffiths. If you're just joining us on the Real Talk live stream presented by California Closets, we're a day away from what was it? Now, I guess it's the postponed implementation date of the threatened tariffs. There sounds like a lot of adjectives here. And again, we all acknowledge that maybe this doesn't happen. But Canadian political leaders, premiers, the prime minister, federal cabinet ministers have been advocating on this. Diplomats have been working on this. And of course, the official opposition has been presenting its perspective as well. I wanted to get your comment on what Pierre Poilievre had to say just a very short time ago, just before we're recording this show. Here's the leader of the official opposition, Conservatives.
If the tariffs do happen, we must retaliate. And we must use the revenues mostly, almost exclusively, to cut taxes for Canadian workers and businesses to bolster our economy against those tariffs. Regardless of what the president does, though, we can't rely on him, and we can't rely on the Americans anymore. We've learned our lesson from 10 years of helplessness. We need to take back control of our economy and bring home a strong, self-reliant, and sovereign nation. Simply put, we need to bring it home. We must bring home our jobs, our resources, our production, our supply chains. We must not only harvest our resources, but we must build LNG plants and ports that can get those resources to overseas markets. That means tax cuts and greenlighting massive resource projects to bring home our jobs, businesses, and money, and to become less dependent on the Americans.
I've got some friends that have been saying this exact same thing for about 10 years now, but it feels like there's a bit more buy-in now on kind of a bit more of a protectionist approach to all this. Do you see it actually happening? Is there enough pressure right now on Canada for the general public to start taking this type of approach a bit more seriously?
Well, I hope so. Like I said at the beginning of the program, and I said last time I was on your show too, we can't waste a good crisis. This is a reminder that we are very connected to the American economy, and the strength over-relied on becomes a weakness. And we have over-relied on having the world's largest economy easy and conveniently across our border. And now we've shown, it's been demonstrated to us just how much of a weakness that is. The only thing I would disagree with Mr. Poilievre is that we have to become more self-reliant. I think Canada, the nature of Canada and the nature of the economy is to make sure that we're just not reliant on the United States only. But I don't think we want this focus on, we're going to isolate ourselves against the rest of the world. We need to branch out to the rest of the world. We're not self-reliant. We are reliant on trade internationally. We just need to make sure that instead of 80% of our customer base being one customer, that we are diversified around the globe. And I think that will make Canada stronger. It will help with our political influence. It will help with our economic growth. And it will draw in new foreign direct investment, new ingenuity, new people, all the things that will continue to make Canada stronger. If we take a Canada-only approach like the Americans are doing, like President Trump is doing right now, I think that will actually put us in a weaker position. That's what it's going to do to the United States with his America First policy. We just can't over-rely on the U.S. moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're listening to Dr. Duane Bratt before we're talking to you, and he says we may need to start looking at a G7, a G6, I guess. There's a song about that, isn't there, Johnny? The G7 without the U.S. and NATO without the U.S. I just want to say it because I guess I'm just thinking out, like, just what a wild time. You would never have said, it didn't matter what president it was before. You'd never go that far. It just wasn't even remotely possible.
I still, you see the quote going around in the video of Ronald Reagan saying something to the effect that, tariffing Canada and not considering them an ally is an anti-American thing to do. They are our best friends and our neighbors, and it's important that we have this relationship continue to build further, which is how we got free trade 35 years ago. So I mean it is almost unfathomable because it is so unreasonable and it is so unlikely and it is such an antithesis to the success of the United States. But that is the chaos they're going to have to deal with for the next 4 years. We have to prepare to make sure we don't have to deal with it in the years going forward.
Yeah, no kidding. Doug Griffiths, the president and CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. I'm taking a look at your website under the events link. I know you guys have a big thing coming up for people that are looking for more insight into the Alberta budget. You've got an event coming up with the finance ministry. You had your coffee with the chamber event that I saw just a short time ago. Always a lot going on there.
Yeah, the coffee at with the chamber event again had 400 people. We're getting 400 to 500 people out to every single coffee with the chamber. We announced our budget event with Minister Horner on a Monday, and on Wednesday it was sold out. We had to move to another venue that can get us that can handle 500 people, and we're almost sold out again. So if you want tickets to come and hear Minister Horner present his budget, I suggest you get them right away. There's not many left.
Good stuff, Doug. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Anytime, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
All right, my man. You can learn more about what they're doing at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce by visiting their website. That's edmontonchamber.com. Obviously, a lot of benefits of membership. We're proud to be a member of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, including opportunities to advertise targeted exposure to other members, find targeted job candidates for openings in your organization. Great recruitment tools there as well. Things like discounted room bookings, conference space, and of course, speaking opportunities where you can share your own subject matter expertise with the business community. You can find out more about the benefits of membership with the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce by visiting edmontonchamber.com. Poll analyst Philippe Fournier from 338 Canada coming up in just a quick second. I saw a comment here from Glenna on our live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. She says Pierre Poilievre is a lost soul at this time. He's trying to recover from his support of Donald Trump. I don't know. I don't know if you saw this National Post feature. Did you see this? Donald Trump, kind of a remarkable interview that he did where he says that Poilievre's biggest problem, Johnny, is that he's not a MAGA guy. Donald Trump says, I don't like what he's saying about me. It's just not positive about me. It's all about him for Donald Trump. But Pierre Poilievre is not enough of a Trump stumper, I guess. And so now he finds himself in a tough position. If I'm Pierre Poilievre, I'm doubling down on Canada, and that's exactly what he's doing. That's why we played that clip. I want to show you a tweet from him where he kind of fires back. He claps back, but interesting position right now. And what about for the average Canadian conservative that's a big fan of what Donald's doing right now, of what the president's doing? There's Pierre's tweet. Mr. President, it is true, says Poilievre. I am not MAGA. I am for Canada first, always. Canada has always been America's best friend and ally, but we will never be the 51st state. That from Pierre Poilievre. What other choice does he have? He obviously has to take a position like that.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point. yeah. I mean, come on.
Yeah. He's got his hard stance against Trump, but then he's also like softening up a bit. Like we saw this during the Four Nations, like these promos running now, him in the mountains holding his wife's hand. Like before it was him like pointing his finger and wagging his fist and all this. And now they're trying to like soften him up. But at the same time, he's got to be tough on Trump right now. I don't think anyone in Canada is agreeing with what's going on here right now. And
if anybody,
I'm sure you saw SNL and Mike Myers over the weekend.
Amazing. How about Mike Myers rocking the Canada is not for sale? I thought he did I thought Mike Myers did an unbelievable job as I guess Lorne Michaels has tapped him on the shoulder to be the Elon Musk. And so we may be seeing a little bit more of Mike Myers over years to come. And shout out to Calgary's Tate McRae, who killed it as well.
My gosh.
One of the most famous Albertans on planet Earth right now.
I'm getting sweaty.
Just nailed the assignment on Saturday Night Live. And just a really significant episode, I thought, over the weekend. But shout out to Mike Myers for rocking.
Episode.
Canada is not for sale. You have to wonder if a big part of Poilievre's, as you describe it, his softening. I don't know if his team would have. They don't
just
want
a little.
They don't want the word soft, but
tell.
I get what you're saying. I wonder if that might have a little something to do with polling. We're going to find out in just a quick second from Philippe Fournier, who does an amazing job, as you know, at 338 Canada. He's a poll analyst. Before we get there, if political science is your thing, international relations, economics, finance, maybe you're looking at an MBA, I want to put Athabasca University on your radar, Canada's open university with world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. You can open your options with the online offerings at Athabasca University. I believe more than 94% of their alumni say that they're satisfied with the quality of their AU education. 94%. You can select your path today. Learn more about an education journey at AU by checking out their website today. That's athabascau.ca. A lot of people buzzing about their MBA program. How many of you were at Friesen Brothers over the weekend on the 1st of March, the first of every month? Your chance to knock 15% off your grocery bill. Any grocery bill of $75 or more. You can check out their website, friesen.com. They've got a Greek pulled pork sandwich right now, Johnny. I know everybody's going to be all excited about. That's one of their Mike's Meals features. And they've also got a 20% off meat sale coming up for St. Paddy's Day. Again, you can find all the details online at friesen.com. That's FRESON.com. Proudly celebrating 70 years in business, still family owned. 2025 is a huge year for them. Always a treat to have a insight and be able to check in with our good pal Philippe Fournier, 338 Canada. He doesn't do the polling. He analyzes the polling, and boy, is there ever a lot to talk about. But why don't we just keep the conversation rolling with exactly where we're at. It's nice to see your face again. Bonkers exchange in the Oval Office. European, North American leaders, Canadian representation there as well, and the whole nine yards. But as we're talking about Pierre Poilievre, the fact that federal Liberal Party members, the vote is open right now. The vote is underway to pick the next leader. It feels like more of a coronation, more of a first ballot scenario. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but how are you wrapping your mind around what's going on right now?
Well, I'm trying to, hello Ryan and hello Johnny. It's good to see you both.
Hey.
I'm trying to concentrate on my work because otherwise I think there's a lot of anxiety going around. And it would be very easy, Ryan, to just obsess on the news cycle every minute, every hour. We have to keep on going on, as we say, and do our best and hope for the best. But it is very worrying right now. And on the political front, I heard you just talked about Monsieur Poilievre and his comments on not being a MAGA guy. Strategically, it is exactly what he should be doing because Donald Trump, even though he does have his fans in this country, it's not that many of them. When we look at the polls, depending on who polls, it's usually between 12 and 18% of Canadians who approve of Donald Trump. So that's 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 8. That's not a lot of people, and we know there can be loud, but there's not that many of them.
Yeah, and at this point, I just Canadians that are supporting Donald Trump with the way that Donald Trump is treating Canada, I don't even have time for it anymore. I'll just say that this show makes a promise to remain perpetually curious and to seek to understand. But at this point, if you're still stumping for Trump north of the border, I think that you've got a few screws loose upstairs, and I don't see myself wavering on that position. What are the polls telling us about how Poilievre's Conservatives are doing right now versus a potentially reinvigorated Liberal Party?
The numbers have been, in the last 2 months, Ryan, the numbers have been absolutely incredible. I've been following this daily for the past decade, federally, provincially. I have never seen such a sharp turnaround as the numbers that we see federally. So let me just quote you some numbers, Ryan, if I may. So Léger poll, Léger, top-rated firm in Canada, in early January, just after Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, 47 Conservative, 21 Liberal. That's a 26-point lead. And then the lead was shrunk to 18 points, and then 9 points, and then 8 points. And last week, we saw 38 Conservative, 35 Liberal. So from 26 points ahead to only 3 points ahead, according to Léger. And you look at all the polling firms, they have different, of course, numbers, but they all point in the same direction. A dramatic turnaround. We could have a very competitive federal election this spring, whereas just 2 months ago we thought it would be a rout. It would be a Conservative blowout, blue from coast to coast to coast.
Yeah, 100%. And I am guilty of proclaiming as much, that if the Liberals went to an election under Justin Trudeau, they were going to be absolutely stomped. So is this, in your opinion, there's a few storylines we're seeing. Is it Poilievre's perceived connection to or affinity for Donald Trump? Is it Mark Carney's credibility coming into play and progressive voters moving back to the Liberals or over to the Liberals? Is it the NDP collapsing under Jagmeet Singh, polling around like 10%-ish approximately? Yeah. What are the driving forces here in your opinion?
Well, it's a bit of all of what you said. So 3 main factors. Number 1, you remove Justin Trudeau, extremely unpopular, not even popular among Liberals in the numbers we had in December. That's number 1. Number 2, a leadership race where you can disagree or maybe dislike the candidates, but many of them are, doing a good job so far in this race, and they have captured a lot of media attention and a lot of people who are looking to an alternative to Pierre Poilievre. That's number 2. And obviously the elephant in the room, and I do mean an elephant, Donald Trump and his threats of tariffs, of annexation, of flipping the world order as we know it. All of these factors have contributed to this tightening. And Pierre Poilievre, as I said a few minutes ago, he is doing the right thing by distancing himself from the MAGA people. It's just that the MAGA people in this country, the polls show that they're on board with Pierre Poilievre. So he has to walk a very tight rope right now. And, we see the NDP crumbling right now in voting intentions. Many of them are saying, well, if we have a choice between whoever leads the Liberals and Poilievre, we have to choose the Liberal leader. But we know that this is very soft support. And so a bad campaign, or let's say Mr. Carney does win next week, bad interview, a stupid comment, and everything could revert back. So we should not take anything for granted.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but a relatively big win, I guess. Let me actually take that back before I even finish my sentence. I would say a big win for Doug Ford and the PCs in Ontario. Yeah. It's a third consecutive majority. He refreshes his mandate for another 4 years. He says he wants to be premier. Essentially, it sounds like till the day he dies. My words, not his. But he says he's loving the job and he wants to keep doing it. The election cost about $130 million. Some people are saying there wasn't a huge shift in seat count. So was it worth it? Bonnie Crombie doesn't even win her seat. But regardless, obviously voters in Ontario like what they see for the most part from Doug Ford, warts and all. He's obviously advocated strongly for Ontario in face of these threatened tariffs. Could Pierre Poilievre learn something from what Doug Ford is doing in Ontario?
Well, that's a good question, Ryan. It's just that, again, the script has flipped because just 2 months ago, Pierre Poilievre was polling higher, both in Ontario and throughout Canada, than Doug Ford was. But the numbers have flipped. And so his slogan, Canada First, Poilievre's slogan, is a very catchy one, and I think the right message for the Conservative team. But they have to follow this up with policy announcement. They have to follow this up like Doug Ford did. Basically, you can blame a lot of things on Doug Ford, but you can't blame him for wavering and for wearing his cap. He's going to be capped in Canada. Canada's not for sale. I know you mentioned Mike Myers a few moments ago. That was pretty sweet. The campaigning basically has to show you can be a steady hand at the wheel while there's a circus south of the border. Monsieur Poilievre has to find a way to reassure those swing voters, this soft support that for the better part of 18 months was siding with the Conservatives because they were not Justin Trudeau. But right now they have reverted back because the Liberals are not Pierre Poilievre. So they have to find an equilibrium right now. If you ask me, Ryan, right now, if an election was held today, who would win? The most likely scenario would be the Conservatives, but it would not be the blowout they were expecting. The Liberals would be competitive. Many parts of the country, we saw crazy numbers. I mean, Francophone Quebec is turning on the Bloc Québécois right now. I did not expect that at all. We have several polls, including Quebec-only polls, that show the Bloc has gone from about 40% of support to the mid-20s. And you can blame that on the geopolitical climate right now.
Help us understand it, though. Like, let's dig into that a little bit more. You're speaking to a national audience here, but predominantly Western Canadian. I mean, you're the expert here. Help us understand it.
Well, the Bloc Québécois is a very good option for the none-of-the-above party. When you do not like what's on the slate, in Quebec, you have the Bloc Québécois. You figure they will defend your interest. Many provinces would love to have such an option, I'm sure, but they don't. But when suddenly we have voters perceive that there's an outside threat and that we have to, keep as a team, keep together, that option vanishes in the minds of many voters. So for the Bloc Québécois right now, in the numbers, they keep the sovereigntist vote, which is about 30% of the electorate, maybe a little less than that. And many of those swing voters, those soft support, again, figured, you know what, we have to stand up to Donald Trump, and now is not the time to spread our vote elsewhere. So that's one explanation for what's going on in Quebec. And I figured also in much of Atlantic Canada, where we saw the Conservatives holding big leads everywhere, and that lead has just vanished in the past few weeks.
Well, I remember back like in the Harper years, and everybody talked about like what do the Conservatives have to do in Quebec to win? How obviously Quebec is key to Conservative success. You can say the same thing about the Maritimes. When people check out your site at 338canada.com, which is a fantastic resource, you've got your updated 338 Canada federal projections. You've updated these just about 24 hours ago, and it shows that the Liberals would be doing all right now. In the Maritimes, relatively speaking, they'd be doing very well. Liberals doing, relatively speaking, very well in Quebec. What does Pierre Poilievre have to do to turn that tide?
In 2011, Stephen Harper proved that a national conservative party does not necessarily need Quebec to win. Harper only won 5 seats in Quebec in that election. However, if you don't win anything in Quebec, to win an election, you have to win everywhere. You have to win Ontario, you have to sweep the West, you have to win the Maritimes. And this is what we were seeing with Poilievre until recently. Making gains in Quebec would be great for the Conservatives. They don't need it if they lead everywhere. But now they don't lead everywhere. So you would expect Mr. Poilievre to try to court those moderate center-right voters that wanted to vote for the Bloc in the suburbs of Montreal, for instance. I mean, the suburbs throughout the country are mostly swing voters that, in a conservative win, usually lean conservative. So Right now, if you look at the map around Montreal, that's about 25 seats. It's significant. There's no conservative seats whatsoever. There's none of them, not even one. So there's a potential here for the Conservatives, but it seems that they don't have the right messaging. And the MPs that they do have in Quebec are in Quebec City and in some regions. They are not in seat-rich regions, which is costing them dearly.
Anybody that watched any TV over the weekend, including the Oscars, has seen obviously the Conservatives are out with their attack ads on Mark Carney in particular. The Liberals or third-party advertisers are out targeting Pierre Poilievre. It feels like we're in the midst of a campaign, which we're not technically quite yet. But there are a couple of things that I think could stick, and the Conservatives are working hard to do it. Number one, carbon tax Carney, and talking about the Carney-Trudeau Liberals. Pierre Poilievre is referencing that now with the hyphen. It's no longer the Trudeau-Singh Liberals. It's the Carney-Trudeau Liberals. And there's also some talk about, while he was chairing the board at Brookfield, whether or not Mark Carney knew about that investment firm's plan to move its office to the United States. I'm not sure that the average Canadian actually cares much about that, much about whether he would have known they were going to move it. Obviously, he probably would have, but I bet every Canadian would care about whether or not Mark Carney is comfortable lying about something when he's supposed to be the steady one, when he's supposed to be the credible one. Could these Conservative attack points stick? Could they be effective? What are you reading into them?
It's entirely possible. I mean, it's just going to start. Mark Carney, if he didn't know he would get massively attacked online and by advertising from the Conservatives, that means he wasn't ready to run anyway. So this is expected. And what you just described, I would guess, I would just only assume that the Conservative war room has plenty on Mark Carney that they will unveil gradually during the campaign. And as you said, I mean, I remember at Christmas, I had a friendly wager with my friend Eric Grenier of my podcast. And I said, the election is going to be on Monday, May 12th. And he thought it would be too late. Now it looks like it will be, the date will be too late. It was like, it could be in April. So we're going to have a snap election campaign, it looks like, and the Conservatives will throw everything they have at Mark Carney, because the numbers we see right now show that the Conservative win is not a given. Had Trudeau stayed on, I think they wouldn't have not relented on these attacks, but I think they would have been feeling much more relaxed going into the campaign than they are now.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, I said that I figured that there'd be a federal election in May, but I'm always curious. You're the poll analyst. Like it's kind of like watching the. I shouldn't compare it to the price of Bitcoin, but boy, has that ever been all of. As Trump's been talking about these alternative coins, the shit coins. I always tell people, don't listen to me for your financial advice. Don't take advice from me, but I will say 100% unequivocally, don't buy any of the crypto coins that Donald Trump's talking about right now with the U.S. Reserve. But the point being, there's short-term trends and there's longer-term trends. And when it comes to the intuition behind the date, like when you drop the writ, when you call an election, when you want to go to the polls, let's assume that it's going to be Mark Carney. Maybe we end up with egg on our face. Maybe it's Chrystia Freeland. Who knows? Maybe based on her incredible Real Talk interview, it's Karina Gould that comes up the middle and I don't think so, though. I think it's probably going to be Mark Carney. Do you maybe say, hey, listen, at this point in crisis, I need a mandate right now. The election is coming up in 6 weeks. Or do you take a look at how that polling's going, and you're taking a look at where it's trending, and you're going, you know what? With another 6 months, this could be back into Liberal majority territory. I'm talking about their war room's mindset here. Could either play out in your mind?
6 weeks ago, Ryan, I would have told you when Mr. Trudeau announced his retirement, I figured, okay, let's say Mark Carney does win the leadership. He will probably take a shot at running in Halifax, the by-election that's supposed to be scheduled for April in Halifax, and then act as a prime minister, get settled, try to find a way to make this parliament last until October, the scheduled date for the election. But looking at these numbers right now, you don't know whether they will revert back. If you take that Léger poll that I mentioned, of course, I only do a weighted average of polls, so we have to be careful not to give too much weight to a single poll. But if you take that latest Léger poll, Liberals win. Liberals win in Ontario, make gains rather in Ontario compared to a few months ago. They win in Quebec, they win in BC, they win in Atlantic Canada. That's a Liberal minority. So if those trends continue, I'm not saying they will, but if they do continue, Liberals would be best positioned to go right away to benefit from this sugar high that this leadership and the uncertainty caused by Trump would bring. We will see, but I'm not making predictions because anybody who would have made predictions around Christmas time or New Year's would have been completely fooled by now. So we are, the numbers right now are completely unexpected and surprising and unprecedented, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying anything new. This has been the reality across our country, and for that matter, I guess in many jurisdictions, including the United States, for a long time. But these federal projections show, again, West versus East. The West is blue. I mean, the Conservatives are looking at potentially sweeping Alberta, probably sweeping Saskatchewan, strong returns in Manitoba, BC as well. I mean, this is East versus West all over again.
Yeah. I mean, the Ontario on the map that you're showing right now, the Ontario is pink because the Liberals have been polling higher and getting more seats in the projections, but the Conservatives are still doing very well in Ontario. 57 seats on average in my projection. That's a lot of seats, and that would give enough seats for Poilievre to handle a minority parliament if he gets the confidence of the House, obviously. The numbers in BC are interesting because that's where we see the most divergence. Some polls still see the Conservatives far ahead of their rivals, and others say the Liberals are in the mid-30s, which would bring them a lot of seats. And BC is a complicated place, my friend. Last federal election, the Liberals finished third in the vote and yet won the most seats of all the parties. With 15. So never take anything for granted. Once again, especially in British Columbia, where the Liberals need to win at least a dozen seats if they want to have a chance to still govern past the next election.
In our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power, Jason is watching us on YouTube. He says, I await to see the United Conservative Party in Alberta flail if a federal Conservative government is elected. He says Premier Smith's entire shtick has been very focused on fighting Ottawa. There would be challenges. Conservative premiers have seen some success in Alberta before with Conservative federal governments, but it's also, I mean, it's been proven time and time again that Conservative federal governments really don't demonstrate a ton of loyalty to the prairie provinces that put them there. Meantime, you have provincial projections as well at 338canada.com. They show that despite the dip in the polls for the Conservatives federally, and they show that despite this alleged scandal involving this government and Alberta Health Services procurement, et cetera, everybody knows the story. The Conservatives are still sitting pretty with a perceived, or let's say a projected 60 seats. Naheed Nenshi waiting for his trip into the legislature, but of course 27 projected. An election a long time away in Alberta. Though crazier things have happened. Do you think that Jason might be on to something? Could a federal Conservative government be bad news for Danielle Smith?
Well, it's very easy for an Albertan, the same way it's been easy for a Quebecer to campaign against the federal government. It's fair game. They all do it, and it's a formula that has worked before. So you play your greatest hits. François Legault has campaigned a lot against the federal government, and it helped him over his career. So I'm not sure how good news it would be, but it's true that federal parties tend to care more about their swing voters, and if you have a strong base that always votes for you no matter what, perhaps they can be an oversight. But to go back to your Alberta comments about the health services in Alberta, we have not yet seen polling on this, and I'm very curious to see how Albertans will react to all these news, because it looks pretty bad. But we know that Conservatives in Alberta are still very much united until they were the last polling that we saw throughout the fall, throughout the winter. But we should have new numbers coming in the spring to see whether they can go through this. So far, Mr. Nenshi has not been able to grow the NDP base. But as you said, Ryan, it's very early. There's plenty of time. And we expect Monsieur Nenshi to enter the legislature next fall after a by-election that should be held around, I think it's June 30th.
Do you think it's weird that he's running, the former 3-term mayor of Calgary, running in Rachel Notley's old riding in Edmonton, Strathcona? What's your take on it?
I mean, it would be weird if he set up there permanently, but as a message to his base, like, I'm gonna get into the legislature no matter what, and then we'll see. I was surprised, Ryan, that Mr. Nenshi did not go for the by-election in Lethbridge that happened just before Christmas. Perhaps they thought it was too risky, but it will be good for the NDP and Mr. Nenshi himself to be able to face off directly with the premier. You're leader of the opposition. This is what you should do.
Philippe Fournier is the founder and the brilliance behind 338 Canada. You can sign up, and I encourage you to subscribe to his newsletter, support his published work. It keeps us in the loop each and every week. Remarkable stuff at 338canada.com. Always great to see your face, and we are richer having heard from you today, Philippe. Thanks for doing it, buddy.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Always a pleasure, and talk to you soon.
Cheers, my man. We'll talk to you again soon. So there you have it. Super Chat Ken in our live chat powered by Park Power says the thing about federal polling, and I'll acknowledge, I mean, a lot of you, some of you here, I see you questioning the credibility of Leger, questioning the credibility of all the other polling agencies, pointing out the fact that pollsters have been wrong before, and you're not wrong. Polls are not elections, right? Polls tell us, allow us to put our finger on the pulse and kind of get a sense of where people are. Are they proven to be correct every single time? No. But are polling firms like Leger credible? Yes. That's where I'd land on that. But Super Chat Ken says the thing about federal polls, they don't reflect results by riding. The Conservatives are still in good shape right now. He says, in my opinion, it'll come down to how good of a campaigner Carney is, which is a great point. I mean, I see a lot of you talking about as well. I saw somebody describe him. This is Erica. Good morning to you. Says, I've listened to pretty much everything Carney said publicly. I'm still looking for some spark, some sass. Unfortunately, he has the charisma of beige paint. Says, uninspiring to say the least. That's kind of Carney's vibe, though. He's the steady guy. He's the credible guy. He's the chairman of the board. He's beige paint. I mean, I feel bad for the color beige. I mean, in the right application with the right accent colors, beige is no. I take your point, Erica. And then how about this from Tracy? And Tracy, you're absolutely not wrong. She says, Ryan, you said it was going to be Poilievre, so how can we believe you? She says, I'm rolling on the floor laughing.
Well,
Tracy, you can't.
Change.
You can't.
Things change.
And things change. Yeah. And I think here's the thing. Somebody else here said, I wish I could give you credit. The live chat is buzzing today. It's great to see you all here. More than 1,200 of you are streaming us live right now, presented by California Closets. We appreciate that. But one of you said that, when it comes down to like the end of the day, you kind of get into a position where like, Carney's got to do this, Poilievre's got to do that, but like, who is Mark Carney and who will they try to turn him into? I don't know if you listened to Ad Issue, the Ad Issue panel hosted by Rosie Barton, and just three obviously really sharp folks, Althea Raj and appreciate Andrew Coyne's voice and Chantal Hébert, and they were talking about how Carney has seen some dips in support, and Carney's encountered some problems when the advisors have been doing too much. When the advisors, I think it was Andrew Coyne who said the advisors are trying, the strategists are sort of trying to turn him into like a Michael Ignatieff. Let him be Mark Carney. Let him be the guy who he is, who he has been. Let him establish himself, but he will have to answer, I think, to provide Canadians, including undecided voters, potential Liberal Party members, an insight into how he is different than Justin Trudeau. I've seen comments here in the live chat. People are, one of you that's watching us this morning said that Justin Trudeau has been brilliant since announcing his resignation, and it's been, I mean, what a mind fuck for Justin Trudeau, to be honest. You resign under an enormous amount of pressure. Everybody remembers the timing. Remember, it was like everyone's talking about the walks in the snow, and he gets sort of like ripped in the parking lot of a BC ski resort in front of his kids by somebody who tells him to get out of BC, and everybody's just piling on him, and the party's polling the lowest it's been in a decade. And Trudeau, who vowed on February 21st of last year in this chair beside me that he would take the Liberals into the next election, that he wanted the fight with Pierre Poilievre, that he wanted to be the one to deal with Donald Trump, ultimately had to acknowledge that the party was dying on the vine and he had to go. Then the entire international landscape changes, and Trudeau comes out with some pretty strong statements. So I think the public is perceiving him relatively favorably. I'm not talking about everybody, folks. Don't light your hair on fire. I get that there's a lot of people that feel like it's probably the second greatest day in Canadian, maybe the third greatest day in Canadian. Maybe there was like D-Day, and then there was Sidney Crosby and the golden goal, and then maybe Justin Trudeau's resignation. For some people, that would be like the top 3 days in Canadian history. Wow. I'm just trying to think of the top 3. But you get the point. But it's the stakes have changed, and I'm not saying that the Liberals would be back where they are right now, as Philippe laid it out in the polling, had Trudeau not resigned, because I think that's a big part of it. Change for the sake of change. Sometimes you got to swap it out. Sometimes you got to trade the player. Colorado had to trade Ranton, and we don't know the true story, but they had to trade him. And sometimes you got to make that move. However, I think that there has been some return to favorability for Justin Trudeau, simply because a lot of people now are uniting. And I'm not saying it's kumbaya, and I'm not saying it's campfires, and I'm not saying that everybody's voting together, because I'm not delusional. No. But people are uniting under the Canadian flag right now.
100%, yeah. And in regards to Carney too, like, he needs a little more emotion. Like, he can be like, I know people like that. Like, he's a numbers guy. He's intelligent. He's calm. He's rational. But he could be a little cut and dry. He was asked a question about Trump and the tariffs and relating to fentanyl, and the interviewer used the word crisis, and he said, "Well, I don't think it's really a crisis here in Canada. It's more of an issue." And I immediately, as someone who, like, just your average Canadian guy, I was like, man, no matter how much of an issue it is, it's still a crisis. Like, family members, people are dying on the streets from fentanyl overdoses and stuff. So the way he said it, I was like, got to show a little more emotion, not be so cut and dry and the numbers guy all the time, because, like, that stuff, that hits a lot of people personally in Canada. And I wasn't offended, because I don't know anyone currently right now living on the streets or who is at risk of overdosing on fentanyl, but I could see how someone who had that in their life would be like, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah, I think that the in particular, talking about the opioid crisis and the fentanyl crisis,
you have to be careful.
Well, and it's obviously it's forefront in people's minds as well, because that's what Donald Trump has pointed at as the justification for the tariffs. And
he was trying to combat that.
But I don't think that anybody believes that, number one. I don't think that anybody believes that this is actually about the border or about fentanyl.
No.
I don't think anybody believes that for 1 second. I saw a theory I don't want to discredit it and piss on it by calling it a conspiracy theory, but I saw some guy on TikTok the other day laying out how the Panama Canal, Canada, and Greenland all fits together on this U.S.-Russia expansion plan. And the way he laid it out, I was like, geez, like, it's kind of interesting stuff. But I don't think anybody believes it about fentanyl. But let me bring the point back to this. If you are going to talk with credibility and compel people to get on board with your perspective, to believe you in what you're saying about the opioid crisis and fentanyl, I think that you have to have some element of empathy. It has to be there, because unless you acknowledge that for a lot of people who use drugs, the drug use and the addiction is the symptom of, or the result of, or related to trauma, poverty, obviously generational trauma. Like, there are many factors at play here. And I think that if you are going to approach the fentanyl crisis, the opioid crisis in Canada, and it is a public health crisis, and you approach it only from a legal standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint, from locking. And I'm not saying we don't need to stop the flow of fentanyl from China. I'm not saying we don't need to shut down drug labs. Another huge drug lab in BC shut down just a short time ago by RCMP, and a shout out to them. These are scourges on our communities. These are murderers. Pierre Poilievre talking about life sentences for people involved in this. There's an important part that law enforcement plays, but it is not the only part. There are social services. There are societal supports. There are evidence-driven healthcare approaches to it that also need to be leaned upon. And I think if you want to have credibility on that, you've got to be looking to the science on all of it. And that'll give you that credibility.
For sure.
I think it's important. Gordon here, good morning to you, watching us live on YouTube, says the difference between these two political leaders, and this is Gordon's opinion, says Mark Carney is actually an educated, smart person. Pierre Poilievre is objectively not. Says all he knows is conflict, insults, and idiocy. hallmarks of conservatism, yes, but not something we need. That from Gordon. I don't think that Pierre Poilievre is not smart. I think Pierre Poilievre is very smart, but I think that you can't compare the CVs. You can't compare the resumes. I mean, Pierre Poilievre to a certain degree deserves credibility, like Jason Kenney did as well, like Karina Gould does as well. Many people that have achieved a ton in their political careers relatively early in their professional lives, right? Like Poilievre qualified for his full federal pension before he was 40. Karina Gould, who sat in our studio a couple of weeks ago, the youngest female federal cabinet minister in Canadian history. There's nothing wrong with achieving success in politics early in life, but it also does come with a trade-off. And it comes with the trade-off that you've likely not accomplished a ton or don't have a ton of experience sitting around boardroom tables, dealing with budgets and bottom lines, managing staff aside from your political staff, whatever your chief of staff does for you. But the point being that Mark Carney brings different things to the table than Pierre Poilievre. We were down in Calgary over the weekend, and I've shared before that Pierre Poilievre and I attended the same high school. He was there with my brother, Jeff. Jeff at the time. Hearing some wild stories from these guys, my brother's circle of friends, and I won't speak on their behalf and drop names unless I get sued, in which case I'll provide the receipts. But one of them was just saying he went to UVic. With Poilievre, political science, and was just saying he just hasn't been following. This guy lives in the States now. He hasn't been following Canadian politics too closely, but he says it's just wild for him now to see Jeff. He still calls him Jeff, I think, tongue in cheek. But he says it's just wild for him to see now. He says he's the same guy that he was in poli-sci in university. He says he's the same approach, like the one-liners, the zingers, not like necessarily a ton of substance all the time, but really effective in lopping opponents off at the knees, whether it was a debate in class or otherwise. And so for a lot of people, voters are smart for the most part. I mean, Donald Trump is president of the United States, but I do want to believe that voters are smart. And
but that works to Pierre's advantage. I think that he's the same guy. Like, I feel like he's someone, if you're in favor of him and are going to vote for him, you kind of can trust that he's not going to flip-flop on a lot of things. He's going to stay the same course. He's going to go the same way on the same road when he gets elected, no matter what. So I think that works to his advantage. And I think that his friends seeing him after, how many years and being like, he's the same guy saying the same things, I think that kind of works to his advantage, because the Liberals, especially Trudeau, who said he was going to do all these things. I mean, Ryan, remember all the things he was going to do. And then, he accomplished things, but there was a lot that Trudeau said that I thought were going to happen and didn't. Fixing how voting works,
electoral reform,
and everything, and then a lot
water
of
on reserves. There has been some progress
I was hopeful
there,
he was going to do.
Yeah, you just sort of look at some problems, and again, we have the luxury here of being insulated from accountability.
Yeah, it's hard to get things
done. We're
done.
not making promises and putting budgets together and actually implementing this stuff. We're chirping the people that are doing it. But I do think that media plays an important role in accountability. So do you, Real Talkers. And I do think I look at some issues like, clean water, reliable water supplies for people living in First Nations in Canada. And you look at that and you go, how is that not a bigger priority? And that might be one example. I see that is one example. Tracy, we see your comment here. We knew we'd get to this at some point. She says, I would love to hear what Ryan and Johnny think about the Gretzky situation. This is Janet. Everybody knows she's like Cher. She's like, deleted it. You can say Janet at the end of the day, but she's gone on the record saying that her hubby, 99, the great one, is heartbroken over accusations that he has sold out Canada for his friendship with Donald Trump. In our home city of Edmonton, there have been some calls. I don't know if there have been any from city councilors or the mayor. I don't think the mayor would dare do this ahead of a municipal election. It would guarantee a loss in my mind. But some people calling for 75th Street in Edmonton. It's a local reference for those of you, but is named Wayne Gretzky Drive. It's the road that used to go to, or still goes to, what used to be the Oilers' home rink, which which is, by the way, being torn down finally. Yeah. But they want it renamed. They want the Wayne Gretzky Drive stripped, which I think is, to be honest with you, I understand where people are coming from, but that's absolute lunacy. But what do you make of this? You're bringing me up to speed. What do you mean she deleted something? Because she went on the record.
Well, she put up a post, saying thank you, Bobby Orr, for defending him and stuff like that, and saying Wayne was really hurt by everything he heard. The comments after the Four Nations face-off and the NHL putting on that event, and then now the post is gone. But my thing is like, for Gretzky, like in my mind, I'm never going to lose that pedestal I have him on. But at the same time, I can't feel sorry for the guy. If you don't want the smoke, don't stand next to the fire. Like a lot of people, musicians, actors, sports stars, they stay the hell away from politics for a reason. So if you're going to go and you're going to hang out with Trump and then you don't like the smoke when half of Canada doesn't like the guy, more, who knows, probably more than that. I mean, you can't get mad at it. And so, I would say I don't think Wayne Gretzky's a bad guy, but like if you don't want people to disagree with your political views, don't put them out in the open like that. Don't hang out with people like that. I mean, it's one thing to go golfing, but to go down to Mar-a-Lago around the election is a whole different thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe I don't know.
I mean, it looked like a soft endorsement is what it was, right? Well, it was an endorsement.
When you're attending a victory, if you're not a member of the media,
he didn't say it, but that's what it was.
Like I've been at election victory parties working for a TV station.
Sure.
But the people that are in the room celebrating with flutes of champagne, that I think it's fair to call it, and whether or not it's an official endorsement,
or if he wins and he comes to Canada and there's a ton of important people in the room, including the Prime Minister, and Wayne Gretzky's there. Heck yeah, awesome! He's an ambassador for Canada. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
But when you go down to Florida and cheers with the guy and
hit
the buffet.
Part of me is like, did Wayne Gretzky underestimate the
100% he did.
But then
he thought he was going to get props from
does he care?
From the Maple Magazine.
But like, does he care? Like, does it matter? Like Gretzky did endorse Stephen Harper in past, and that's fine. Like, do whatever you want, vote however you want. That's fine. And again, for a lot of people, there's this kind of moment of reckoning where, like, if you're sports hero or your music hero or your literary hero, I mean, there's been people like I don't know. I'm not trying to drag all these folks into the same conversation, but like, there's Harry Potter fans that have real issues with J.K. Rowling's position on trans people and the like. There's, just the other day I saw, somebody obviously celebrating the career of Michael Jackson, and it prompted an interesting conversation in our friend group about whether or not you can still blast Michael Jackson at your parties. I mean, you still play like the classic MJ, like the top 10 MJ songs, and the whole room starts moving, but like obviously very problematic. I'm not trying to compare all the scenarios.
No,
I'm just saying your heroes will let you down.
100%.
It's unrealistic that you will vote the same as all of your favorite athletes. But I do think that, and there's also like, correct me if I'm wrong, Real Talkers, and I would love maybe a flamethrower, an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com for this Friday. We have a special Real Talk Roundtable, by the way, coming up. We want to observe and let you know that we are observing the 20th anniversary of the Mayerthorpe shootings, which is just I can't imagine that. Talk about a where were you when moment. More on that to come this week on Real Talk. But maybe it's a flamethrower submission to talk@ryanjesperson.com on athletes and celebrities and how they vote and how they show their support. But like, there's also a difference. I think it's a whole other step for like Wayne Gretzky to support Stephen Harper versus supporting Donald Trump. Trump is such an outlier. He's just such a unique,
polarizing. Yeah,
it's, you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand there's a lot of people that don't have an appetite for Stephen Harper. There's a lot of people that would carry Harper's water until the day they die. Like, and that's fine. Yeah. You can do whatever you want. But I think it's one thing for an athlete to sort of stick their neck out there
Of course.
On a smaller scale, I remember Zach Hyman, the Oilers sniper, Connor McDavid's winger, supporting Israel early after October 7th.
Well, you
and
still got
some of the
Ovi.
blowback there. And
Ovechkin,
Ovi
you
and
go to his
Putin.
Instagram, it's Putin and him is his profile picture still.
100%.
And whether that's a thing where like he doesn't want to change it to call attention to it or not, like just don't look. I learned this a long time ago. You got a favorite musician, you got a favorite band, you got a favorite hockey player, you got a favorite anything. Do not look up their political, religious, or personal beliefs, because you most of the time you're going to be let down. I'll go back to The Dark Knight. I love the line from The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain, and that's what happens. Like especially as people get older, they get more ingrained in their opinions, and this is what happens. Like you see someone like Wayne who is like. He's a dually, man. He's like me. Like he loves America. He loves living there. He loves being there. He loves Canada. I know that. But at the same time, like this was an endorsement of Trump. And if you don't like it, like if you don't want the smoke, Wayne, don't go down and stand next to the fire. I'll say it again. Don't go down and hang out with Trump. But you can't complain about it after because people are going to disagree with you. A lot of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Garth, good to see you in our live chat. Garth says you like your heroes for their music, for their sports, not for their politics. Let people be. And I do agree to a certain extent, but for a lot of folks, that's like a no-go, right? Like it's for a lot of people. I mean, I just think I get the Gretzky thing. I get why a lot of people are sort of like really pissed off about it, and really, I'm probably more disappointed. Right? Isn't that the joke that everybody always says with like your parents? It's like you want your parent. You'd rather have your parents be mad at you than be disappointed.
Yeah. Well, it'd be different if like he went down to Mar-a-Lago, all this thing happened, and then he showed up at Four Nations with a jersey on, with a Canada jersey on. But he didn't. He went to both dressing rooms. You saw him on TV coming out of the American dressing room. He's in a plain suit. Like everyone else is in red, man. It didn't feel right to me. I can see how people were like, "What's happening here?"
I get it, and also, and I'm not trying to be. This is not Johnny and I didn't strategize this ahead of time. I'm not playing devil's advocate. This is like
you just asked me.
I'm just saying, like he also was traded to Los Angeles and grew the game.
Yeah.
What is there now? 32 teams in the league, I think, right? There was 21, I think, when he was traded to LA, if my math's correct. There's markets in Anaheim and San Jose, and the North Stars went down to Dallas, and there's a team, and there's two teams in Florida, and like there's a team in Carolina, and I
would say him and Bettman are responsible for everything the NHL's done in the last
and I'd
30
give more
years.
and I'd give more credit to like at least culturally to Gretzky than Bettman. He married like the Hollywood star. He's raised his kids in the United States. He's obviously like I'm just trying to like here's where how my brain is working and how I'm sorting this out. Like number one, stripping the name of Wayne Gretzky Drive is ridiculous.
That's crazy.
That's ridiculous. But I think like Wayne Gretzky GM'd the team. I mean, like where do you want to start? Right? Like you look at what he accomplished in the 1980s and for Canada with like Mario Lemieux and Paul Coffey and all these great Canadian players, GMing the team in 2002 in Salt Lake City to win on American soil with the Looney and the ice and like his like I just think I don't like he's the greatest player in the history of the game, and I just think like I don't know. I'm not trying to argue in bad faith, but if you had like Michael Jordan that went into like the Eastern Conference, and the bad example because they don't do it this way anymore, but at the NBA All-Star game, went in the Eastern Conference room and the Western Conference room. Somebody's going to rip me for making this comparison. But like when you're the greatest of all time, it's a little bit different in like who you talk to.
Of course, but with everything going on,
Wayne Gretzky, with everything going on, I get it. But Wayne Gretzky is an ambassador for the game. Is he an ambassador for Canada? He's a Canadian. He's a proud Canadian. I've really never to this point ever before heard, who I'd love to hear speak to this is Walter. I'd love to hear his dad speak to this. But I mean, just to sort of question, I get that like Gretzky's friends with Donald Trump, and like a lot of people are like friends with Donald Trump. There's a lot of people that have kind of awkward reckonings now that have been friends with Donald. Hillary Clinton was friends with Donald Trump for a long time. Like, like Oprah Winfrey, like Whoopi Goldberg was like pals with Donald Trump forever. Now she just like, interesting to see her at the Oscars last night. But it's just, it's a different game now. I don't know. I just think that Wayne Gretzky has done incredible things for Canada. He's also done incredible things for the game of hockey. I understand why people are having a really tough time seeing the guy you refer to as the great one, at the party, at the election night party, his son, curiously dressed, by the way. I don't know which one it was, Ty or Trevor, whichever one it was, but everyone's seen the picture. Like Gretz is wearing like the tux. Janet looks unreal. There's DJ, their son-in-law, and Paulina and everything. And then their one son's wearing like sweats and a MAGA hat. And it was just kind of like just a weird look. Like it was just a weird... But so I 100% understand why some people are just like right now, like what I talked about 5-10 minutes ago, where I said like a lot of Canadians are kind of uniting or coming together in a certain way, in a certain context under the flag. And so then I get it, because now a lot of people, it's like you're either with us or you're against us. And to a certain degree, I get it. And I also understand the position that someone like Wayne Gretzky is in. I don't understand the dynamic of his friendship with Donald Trump, but I know that it's been described as a close one. Like they've known each other for a long time.
Down there a few times. He was at the inauguration. So, I mean, it's probably pretty close. But, hey, man, I'll just throw this up because we don't have a lot of time to talk about Oscars. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow. But we saw this, and, man, does this ever ring true.
I love this. This is one of my favorite Instagram follows, Dudette with sign. There's Dude with sign as well.
Dudette's good, too.
But this is so good. Yeah, with everything, with everything going on right now, basically, we
all deserve an Oscar
for acting like everything's okay. Pretty bad. What do you think?
Because it's not. And you're talking about this stuff. This is going to be a long 4 years, but I hope we come out on the good side of it, because I feel like just like, everyone's been saying on our show, like we're not enemies, we're friends, Americans, Canadians. This is the greatest partnership in the history of the world. Like it's gotta work itself out. And I think just right now, it's a bruise, it's a scar that's really, really raw, really fresh.
Yeah.
It's getting salt thrown in a wound, and but I think it'll work itself out. I think we will be okay.
I love this. I want to let's give the floor to Real Talkers here in our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power. This is M8 says, pick your Wayne. Wayne's World or Wayne Gretzky? I know who I pick. I love that, with Mike Myers rocking the Canada's Not For Sale. This is Wobbly Inc. says, what do you do if you're not a hockey person? You might have a completely different opinion of Wayne Gretzky. Fair point. Alberta Girl in all caps is just yelling at me. Says, Ryan, he was at the inauguration. Listen, I understand. I understand why people are like I said to you. I mean, I said it earlier in this episode, like Canadians right now that are defending Donald Trump, I'm not taking you seriously. I will listen to you, and then I will poke fun at you, and I will agitate and irritate you because if you're stumping for Trump as a Canadian right now, you're an enemy of the state. You have no business using the word patriot. All these people through the convoy time, all these people that have been flying that Canadian flag, all of these people that were talking about Canada and that were talking about what Canada stands for. A lot of you are also now rocking those red MAGA hats, and I've got no time for it, and you've got no business using words like patriot. So I'm planting my flag and being very clear. And Alberta Girl, I understand why it drives you bonkers that Wayne Gretzky is friends with Donald Trump and is publicly supporting him. I get it. I guess I'm just trying to comment specifically and give you something of substance to my opinion on whether or not you strip the name of a road, Wayne Gretzky Drive, in the city, respectfully to everybody else, the city that Wayne built, right? 4 Stanley Cups in Edmonton with Wayne Gretzky, the greatest of all time. I see Super Chat Ken, who says that's not a thing, says he's the greatest of his time. I think he's the greatest of all time, but I digress. Ovi's about to take him over. Ovi's got like 20 games left to score 10 more goals to become the all-time NHL goals leader. That's going to be interesting to see. How about that? A Russian overtaking a Canadian for the all-time goal lead in the National Hockey League. Let us know what you think about this. Talk at ryanjesperson.com, and Bunny Slippers is giving a shout out to Mark Messier. Says the only stumping he does is for Lay's chips. Yeah, fair enough. How about Moose? Moose knows when to just stay out of the fray, doesn't he? He knows when to stay out of the fray. Before we get to a weekly tradition here, I did want to remind you of the incredible work that our friends at California Closets are doing. And I know for a lot of you, this is getting into the time of year that the temperatures are getting back above zero in your neck of the woods, and you're starting to think about your plan for getting organized. A big part of that's going to be spring cleaning, is going to be decluttering. Instead of putting away some of those big old parkas and those big old boots that have served you well, you're going to be donating those. And then for some of you, you're going to say, well, this is the time of year, you're putting away the winter decor. You want to do it in an organized fashion. This is the time. This is the best time of year to check in with the team at California Closets. Of course, every project they do starts with a free design consultation where you can outline your vision for a custom closet or storage solution for your entire home. You can talk theory, you can talk about design, you can talk about budget, and then that's when their one-of-a-kind team gets to work. Whether it's your primary bedroom, a garage storage system, a Murphy bed in your home office, a mudroom, a boot room, a laundry room, or whatever else, nobody does custom designed spaces better than California Closets. You can request that free consultation today by visiting californiaclosets.ca. And we wanted to give a shout out to our friends at Complete Care Restoration. For a lot of people, life can change in an instant, whether that's a fire, maybe that's an unexpected flood, a burst pipe, a sewer backup. Maybe it's what you thought was going to be a small home renovation project that has all of a sudden revealed asbestos or black mold. This is not the type of thing you want to go at alone. The team at Complete Care Restoration has more than 25 years of experience restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind, and they'll work directly with your insurance company. You can take that right off your plate. Go with the peace of mind that comes with Complete Care Restoration. Contact them 24/7. You'll find more online at completecarerestoration.ca. My mother-in-law's in the live chat right now. Shout out to Deb. Good to see you. Love you guys. They've been looking after our pup Myrol over the past week or so in their beautiful Middle Lake, Saskatchewan farm. She says, I love how Mike Myers did the Gordie, the elbows up gesture on SNL, the Gordie Howe elbows up gesture. She says that was absolutely perfect. I love that. I thought that was really good as well. As we wrap up this first episode back in a fast-moving one, obviously we've got a lot to come this week. We will be honoring Peter Schiemann, Brock Myrol, Leo Johnston, and Anthony Gordon, the 4 RCMP officers who lost their lives 20 years ago today. I can't even believe that. March 3rd, 20 years ago. Do you remember where you were when you heard about that?
I can't remember where I was, but I remember the parade outside our window. Do you remember that? That was unbelievable. I think back to 20 years ago on March 3rd, I had just started. I was relatively new into a radio job in Red Deer, Alberta, and of course everybody knows this happened in Mayerthorpe, obviously west of Red Deer, west of Edmonton, and I just remember I had worked the morning shift. Everybody's got their own version of this. Everybody's got their own "Where were you when?" What year?
This would have been 2005. So this would have been March 3rd of 2005, and I just remember for a lot of people, it's the most violent. It's the deadliest officer involved shooting tragedy. Obviously, a huge crime. Obviously, in Canadian history.
But how did you hear?
Because I had been working. So I'd been working in the newsroom in the morning. This new radio job. I'd only been on the job for like 4 months, and the morning shift starts here on the air at like 5 or whatever it was, and went home and it was sort of like middle afternoon, fitting in a nap kind of thing. And then just phone call. And it was our assignment editor and reaching out saying, we need you to come back in. Said there's something, we don't know. The police scanners were going off. And I do remember on my way back into the studio, kind of all hands on deck in that type of situation. And obviously the central Alberta, Alberta and Canada was rocked by this horrific tragedy. But in particular, like there were many connections and many ties to central Alberta. But what I do remember on the way in was RCMP vehicles, and these are like we don't call them SWAT, but the ERT, sort of the emergency response teams, the squad cars, the SUVs, just woof, 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 like on the highway, just one after the other, and what Canadians would learn to be the case after that, and the grim reality of what had happened. This gunman, obviously everybody knows the story, but just rocked I think the entire country, and and not just law enforcement, but people around the world. There will be tributes through this week, including here on Real Talk, as we remember these 4 and law enforcement officers that put themselves in the line of fire, that put themselves in unimaginably dangerous scenarios every single day to keep our country safe. This one, you remember executing a search warrant on a ranch, a man that was known to police. I think it was Peter Schiemann of the 4 that was actually off duty at that time. He was in plain clothes and had been on site, died by the squad car, as if I remember accurately, trying to get into the trunk, trying to get a firearm out of the trunk, and that's where he was shot by this gunman, who obviously was never ultimately held accountable for this based on his decision to end his own life. But we talk a lot. We promote this flamethrower. We give you an opportunity, to sort of sound off and give us your fiery takes. But I also recognize in scenarios like these are instances that bring a nation together. It doesn't matter. I mean, we've talked a lot about who you're voting for and what the polls are saying. I don't remember anybody talking about who voted for whom as a result of this. Obviously, there's crime and punishment, justice, sentencing, sort of bail. There's a lot of politics that come as a part of this, but I do remember what I remember clearly then, and what I feel 20 years later is that this brought a country together to grieve. This brought a country together to communicate to law enforcement officers and to their families as well on recognizing and appreciating the role that law enforcement plays in our communities. And if you have a thought on a more sober side, maybe not fiery, maybe not bombastic and theatrical, but just you want to let us know where your head's at with this, you can always send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com, and it would be our honor to share some of the messages, and we'll commit to sharing those messages through this week and beyond. Our thoughts, of course, today on the anniversary and throughout this week and this month with the Schiemann, Myrol, Johnston, and Gordon families who suffered an unimaginable loss on March 3rd, 2005, 20 years ago to this date. Commit to remembering them. How important is that? Each and every week, the first episode of every week, with so many things happening in the news cycle, I'm grateful for what our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy do, giving us a chance to just step outside the news cycle for a second and just recognize some of the good that happens around us, some of the beautiful things that are happening in our communities, random acts of kindness, people paying it forward. And we got this incredible email from Real Talker Karen, who sent this in, and I wanted to make sure we fit it in for Positive Reflections presented by Kuby Renewable Energy. We are just out of a cold snap. I know I'm sorry to drag everybody back into this and remind you that across Western Canada, in our home province of Alberta, record-setting cold snaps in a number of different communities, including our home city of Edmonton, over the past number of weeks. We're talking about like burst water mains, and we're talking about cars that weren't starting, and people talking about frostbite, obviously life and death situations for people experiencing homelessness. I mean, it was gnarly, absolutely gnarly. And Karen wrote this in, and we thought it was a perfect fit. She says, I heard you mention your studio without water. Remember that, Johnny? We had a morning without water. There was like 6 inches of ice outside our downtown Edmonton studio. We walked in a couple of weeks ago, and it was like minus 30 something. And she says, this water main break, says Karen, I feel your pain. She says, we lost water on the past weekend due to a break. She says there have been 3 additional water main breaks in our alley since then, and we finally got water for just more than a few hours before supper time. Right around the time she's writing us this email. She says, it's been a revelation for how much we all take our basic infrastructure for granted. Water all day is a real gift. And she says, I was always thinking about writing a quick piece for Positive Reflections presented by Kuby about this situation before. She says, although at our 3rd water main break, I wasn't feeling so positive. She said, but after that brutal weekend of weather, no water, compromised heating in our building, you may think I had nothing to cheer. But, says Karen, I had such appreciation for the typically or usually unsung utilities workers, in her case, EPCOR workers, who tirelessly worked long hours to resolve these problems in unimaginable circumstances. She says when taking out the garbage or going out to fill a jug with water was almost unbearable, there they were, working on the long weekend in minus 30 to serve their customers. All of them rock stars. I can't express my admiration enough for their professionalism and their commitment. I love that. Karen, giving a shout out to the unsung heroes, those every single day that are out in very challenging circumstances to ensure our luxuries, our comforts are restored as quickly as possible. Karen, I love the reality check. I love the perspective check, and thank you for that. If you want to be like Karen and send us a note about something that made your day, something that showed you a silver lining, something you think the audience would benefit from hearing, you can send us your positive reflection anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. And for a free solar quote, make sure you check out Kuby.ca. Coming up on the next episode of Real Talk, he wants to be the next mayor of Calgary. We'll find out what Jeremy Farkas learned and how he's changed his perspective since he lost the last mayoral election, plus a follow-up on that controversial cougar kill outside Canmore. I told you the Blood Origins Canada team, the hunting advocates, they're pretty pissed off about what they heard on Real Talk. We said, come on the show and talk to us about it. So they will. That's also coming up on March 4th. We hope to see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Randy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.